expanded your boundaries, you've expanded your own limits, you've pushed them a little bit further. Well, pushing a little bit past your limits and expanding like a balloon just a little further, that's greatness to me. Not accepting, but moving past your own limits. Human nature kind of contains us. It creates a limit for us. We can't become a chimpanzee or a sheep. We are human, and this is the limiting fact. But by knowing the laws of human nature, you can begin to explore a little bit further out and become something a little bit more. You can take your irrational nature and become more reasonable and rational. Be yourself. Be as weird as you want to be. Stop listening to other people and doing what they tell you. Just follow what your soul tells you, what makes you different, and be weird. We need more weird people, more individuals who are unique, who create art and businesses that reflect themselves. So just be you, be weird. Everyone thinks that their generation is superior. So you want to be aware of the fact that if you're dealing with millennials, they're not inferior, they're not superior, they're just of a different generation. It's like an animal that evolved in a different way. And so you want to be aware of what makes their life different and where their values come from. If you're a Gen Xer, you valued more than anything individualism. You grew up in that period where your parents were from the 60s generation and they tended to not be the best parents and they often left you alone. Now yours might have been different, but that was the culture that we lived in. So people in the Gen X generation, and this has been proven by studies, tended to be much value individualism and self-reliance. Millennials are not like that at all. They grew up in the period of 9/11 and the crash of 2008. They are very much more fearful about it. They don't necessarily believe that they control their own destiny. They think that there are a lot of forces out there that they can't control, particularly when it comes to like Wall Street and things like that. If you try so hard in the work world to impress the people around you and impress the boss, or I call it the master, never outshine the master above you, could be a woman, but that's the word we use, you might end up inadvertently triggering their insecurities. They might end up thinking that you are more popular than they are, or they might start worrying that perhaps you're after their job or whatever. And so it's a story that repeats itself endlessly, where you end up becoming fired or isolated in your position, and you're not aware of what happened. Because if a boss, fires you because of this, they're never going to say, well, you made me feel insecure. They're going to come up with some rationality. Sure. They're going to say, your performance isn't up to par, whatever it is. I feel like everybody has potential for greatness. And greatness would mean something a little bit larger than what you've already done. For going a little bit beyond what you've already created, going a little bit past your limits. Great implies kind of size and largeness. And so everybody has the potential for greatness. And greatness is realizing your own potential. So you need a combination of the two, but you have to be very honest with yourself, and crafting the right kind of attitude in which you accept everything in life, you accept even your own flaws to a degree, is very, very powerful. It's the most powerful thing. I talked about it earlier, like a realistic attitude, an accepting attitude. But you have to understand it's not going to come tomorrow. There are no self-help books that are going to turn you around in 24 hours. There's not a podcast in the universe that will change you overnight. It's going to take work day in and day out, but you will see the benefits as I see them with my letting go mantra. So the right attitude can only come through self-reflection and self-awareness. That's the only way it'll ever happen. And what happens with a lot of people is, as they get older and they accumulate pain and hurts from broken relationships, is they don't want to be vulnerable anymore because they don't want to have to go through that. But that means that the person that broke your heart, that made you vulnerable, has won, has defeated you, has made you turn into something that you don't want to become. So you have to be able to feel that you can be vulnerable. And if you're a seducer trying to seduce someone, revealing to that other person that you have fallen under their spell is almost the most seductive thing you can do, because it's deeply, deeply exciting to feel that that other person is charmed by us. But in order to do that, you have to be vulnerable to them. Well, there are two laws that kind of go together, I'd say. The first one is law number 1, never outshine the master. And you'd be surprised how many people violate this law. And the premise of it is that the person who's above you, and there's always somebody above you, no matter how high you rise, has an ego. And you're not aware that even people who are very successful have egos and insecurities. You assume that they're so strong and powerful, they reach this high position, that you can almost, do anything. You don't have to worry about it because they're so strong. But in fact, the higher people rise, the more sensitive and prickly they actually become. They're very worried about whether you respect them enough, etc. They're worried whether, what are people saying behind their back?